Imagine waking up to find your family heirlooms gone, or returning from holiday to discover your home stripped of every priceless possession. From multi-million-pound jewel heists to burglars creeping in while families slept, these crimes shook the UK to its core. Maresfield, East Sussex, £50,000 theft. A quiet village in East Sussex. Families asleep, lights out, and neighbors tucked in for the night. On the surface, nothing seems out of place, but in the shadows, danger was already moving. This wasn't a random act. It was precise. Calculated. A targeted strike worth more than £50,000 in designer watches and luxury handbags. How did they pull it off in the heart of a quiet community? What drove them to take such risks? And what happened after a crime so bold, it shook this village to its core? Maresfield, a small village tucked away in the heart of East Sussex. Known for its quiet lanes, leafy streets, and countryside charm, it's the kind of place where doors are often left unlocked and neighbors greet each other by name. Families settle here for the peace, the safety, and the promise of a slower pace of life. For years, crime was little more than a distant headline, something that happened elsewhere. Here, evenings passed quietly, with the sound of owls in the trees and the glow of porch lights guiding people home. But one night changed that sense of calm. In a place where trouble was rare, burglars struck with confidence, breaking into a home and walking away with luxury goods worth more than £50,000. What began as just another ordinary night in Maresfield quickly became a story that would ripple through the village, leaving residents questioning just how safe their community really was. It began with careful observation. The burglars knew the house, its layout, and its weak points. While one kept watch from the garden, another scaled the side of the property, making his way to an upstairs window. With precision, they slipped inside, quiet, deliberate, and focused on their prize. Once indoors, they wasted no time. Drawers were opened, wardrobes searched, and within minutes, they had gathered their target, designer handbags and watches worth more than £50,000. These were not items taken at random, they were luxury goods chosen for their value and demand on the black market. What made this crime even bolder was not just what they took, but how they did it. Neighbors nearby slept through the night, unaware that just across the fence, a burglary was in progress. Even with modern security measures and the watchful nature of small communities, the thieves moved with confidence, vanishing into the night before anyone noticed a thing. By morning, the family discovered what had happened. Their home, once a sanctuary, had been invaded, and their most valuable possessions were gone. The peace of Maresfield had been broken. When the burglary was reported, Sussex police moved quickly. Officers arrived at the scene to secure the property, gathering every detail that could point to who was behind the break-in. Fingerprints, footprints in the garden, and the way the upstairs window had been forced open, each became a vital clue. Detectives knew they were dealing with experienced offenders. The choice of entry, the speed of the theft, and the targeted items all suggested planning rather than chance. CCTV from nearby homes and businesses was collected, while door-to-door inquiries were carried out to see if anyone had noticed strangers in the area or unusual activity on the night of the burglary. Police also appealed to the public for information. High-value luxury items like the ones taken are difficult to move without drawing attention, so investigators tracked local pawn shops, online marketplaces, and second-hand luxury dealers, hoping the stolen watches and handbags would surface. The investigation was not just about catching the thieves, it was about restoring a shaken community's trust. For Maresfield residents, this was a reminder that even the quietest places are not beyond the reach of organized crime. Under UK law, burglary is defined in the Theft Act 1968 as entering a building as a trespasser with the intent to steal, inflict harm, or cause damage. It's not just about what is taken, it's about the violation of a person's home, the one place they should feel safe. For offenses involving homes, the law is particularly severe. A conviction for residential burglary can carry a sentence of up to 14 years in prison, reflecting how seriously the justice system treats crimes that strike at the heart of personal security. Legal experts often highlight that burglary is among the most traumatic crimes for victims. Beyond the financial loss, it leaves families feeling exposed, their privacy shattered. The law is designed not only to punish those who commit such offenses, but also to deter others by making the consequences unmistakably clear. In the case of Maresfield, the burglary wasn't just a theft of watches and handbags, it was a challenge to the law itself, a test of how swiftly and effectively justice could respond. With the crime scene examined and leads in motion, detectives turned their focus to tracking down the suspects. CCTV footage from nearby roads was studied frame by frame, searching for unfamiliar vehicles or individuals moving through the area at suspicious hours. Automatic number plate recognition cameras across East Sussex were checked to see if the burglar's escape route could be traced. Meanwhile, investigators kept a close watch on the luxury resale market. Designer watches and handbags worth tens of thousands rarely change hands quietly. Pawn shops, second-hand boutiques, and online platforms were flagged, with officers alerting dealers to look out for the stolen goods. Police intelligence units also compared the Maresfield burglary with similar high-value thefts across the region. Patterns in entry methods, targeted items, and timing were examined, raising the possibility that this was the work of an organized group rather than lone opportunists. As the search intensified, one question drove the investigation forward: would the burglars make a mistake, one slip, one trace of evidence, that would lead straight to their arrest? When suspects were finally identified, the evidence built by detectives became the backbone of the case. Surveillance footage, forensic traces, and witness statements tied the burglary to a small group of offenders believed to be targeting wealthy homes across the region. Those arrested were brought before the courts on charges of burglary and handling stolen goods. Prosecutors laid out how the burglars gained entry through the upstairs window, how they coordinated their movements, and how they attempted to move the stolen handbags and watches into the black market. The defense argued for leniency, but the scale of the theft and the clear planning behind it weighed heavily against them. For the victims, it was not just about recovering possessions but about seeing accountability delivered in a court of law. The judge stressed the seriousness of the crime, entering a family home in the dead of night, stealing property worth tens of thousands, and leaving behind a sense of fear no family should have to endure. The burglars faced prison terms that served as both punishment and warning, a reminder of how firmly the law responds when the sanctity of the home is violated. The Maresfield burglary was more than a story of stolen handbags and watches. For the victims, it was the shock of waking up to find their home, once a place of comfort and security, violated in a single night. For neighbors, it was a reminder that crime can strike even in the quietest of villages, where safety is often taken for granted. The case showed how swiftly organized criminals can move, how carefully they plan, and how deeply their actions affect the lives of ordinary families. But it also demonstrated the persistence of the law, detectives piecing together evidence, the courts enforcing justice, and a community standing together after its peace was broken. From a distance, it may seem like just another burglary statistic. But for those who lived through it, the Maresfield case is a lasting reminder that behind every crime is a family changed, a community shaken, and a lesson in how fragile security can be. Wanborough, Swindon, £21,000 holiday heist. For most families, a holiday means freedom, a chance to step away from routine, to switch off, and to enjoy time without worry. But while they pack their bags and lock the door behind them, someone else may be watching. To a burglar, an empty house isn't just quiet, it's opportunity. In Wanborough, a village near Swindon, one family set off on their winter trip. Days later, their home was no longer the safe place they had left behind. Inside, burglars had struck with precision, targeting valuables worth over £21,000. They didn't take just anything. They chose with care: Breitling watches, a sapphire diamond ring, items that could be carried easily, sold quickly, and bring in a fortune on the black market. So how did the thieves know the house would be empty? What drove them to take such risks? And how did police react as a wave of burglaries began sweeping through the area? This is the story of the Wanborough holiday heist, a crime that turned one family's time of rest into a nightmare, and forced an entire community to question just how safe their homes really were. Wanborough sits on the edge of Swindon, surrounded by rolling fields and winding country lanes. It's a village that blends rural charm with suburban comfort, a place where people move to escape the pressures of city life, where neighbors stop to chat on the street, and families leave for holidays without a second thought. For years, crime in Wanborough was little more than the occasional petty theft. Serious break-ins were rare, and most residents felt secure behind their doors. It was the kind of community where safety seemed almost guaranteed. But during the festive season, when families headed abroad or visited relatives, the balance shifted. Rows of empty houses and quiet streets became attractive to those looking for quick profit. And in the winter of 2024, one home in Wanborough became the target of a burglary that would shatter the village's sense of calm. A family who left for holiday returned to discover not just that their valuables were gone, but that their trust in the safety of their home had been broken. For Wanborough, this was more than a burglary, it was a wake-up call. Between December 20, 2024 and January 4, 2025, while the family enjoyed their holiday, burglars moved in. They chose their moment carefully, a long stretch of time when the house would be empty, the perfect window for a clean strike. Entry was forced, but not reckless. The thieves knew how to get inside without drawing attention. Once in, they searched with purpose, ignoring ordinary items and going straight for what mattered most, valuables that could be slipped into a bag and sold for thousands. They took Breitling watches, known for their precision craftsmanship and high resale value, along with a sapphire diamond ring, a piece that carried not only significant financial worth, but deep personal meaning for its owners. In total, the haul was valued at around £21,000. By the time the family returned, their home had been stripped of its most treasured possessions. The shock was immediate. Their sanctuary had been violated, their memories tied to those objects stolen in their absence. This wasn't a random smash and grab. It was deliberate. Calculated. A burglary that turned a season of joy into a bitter reminder that even in a quiet village, no home is beyond reach. When the family reported the burglary, Wiltshire police quickly recognized it wasn't an isolated case. Wanborough and the wider Swindon area had seen a noticeable rise in burglaries during the holiday period, and this heist fit the pattern: carefully timed, high-value items, carried out while families were away. Officers stepped up patrols in and around the village, making their presence visible on the streets to deter further break-ins. Community alerts were issued, urging residents to secure their homes, use timers on lights, and let trusted neighbors know if they'd be away. At the same time, detectives began the painstaking work of piecing together evidence. CCTV from nearby roads and properties was reviewed, looking for suspicious movements during the window of the crime. Jewellery shops, pawnbrokers, and online resellers were put on notice about the distinctive Breitling watches and the sapphire diamond ring, items too valuable to disappear quietly. The burglary was no longer just one family's tragedy. It became part of a larger operation to stop an organized wave of holiday break-ins sweeping across the county. The question was clear: could police catch up to the thieves before they struck again? Detectives knew timing was their strongest lead. The break-in happened during the holidays, a period when other houses in Wiltshire had also been targeted. That pattern suggested a crew working from a list: burglars who watched for homes left empty and then struck when the risk was lowest. Investigators began cross-referencing the Wanborough burglary with similar reports in Swindon, Marlborough, and nearby villages. Entry points, items stolen, and the precision of the strikes all pointed toward organized offenders rather than casual opportunists. Forensics teams examined the house for traces, fingerprints, footprints, tool marks, anything that might tie the burglars to the scene. Meanwhile, officers monitored the black market for high-value watches. Breitling timepieces are rare, traceable, and often registered by serial number, making them a risky item to fence without leaving a trail. Community intelligence also played a role. Tips about unfamiliar vehicles seen parked near homes in the days before Christmas gave detectives new lines of inquiry. Combined with ANPR camera checks, the search began to narrow. The challenge was clear: this wasn't just about catching burglars. It was about stopping an organized network that had turned family holidays into their most profitable season. Eventually, the investigation led officers to suspects believed to be part of a wider burglary ring operating across Wiltshire and beyond. The evidence, from forensic traces to patterns of stolen goods surfacing in second-hand markets, was strong enough to bring them before the courts. They faced charges of burglary and handling stolen property, serious offences under UK law that carry heavy prison sentences when high-value theft and deliberate targeting of homes are involved. Prosecutors emphasized the careful planning behind the crimes, selecting houses left empty for holidays, forcing entry with precision, and stealing items that could be sold quickly for large sums. The court heard how the victims returned from their holiday to a ransacked home, their joy replaced with devastation. This wasn't just about lost jewelry and watches, it was about a family robbed of peace of mind. In sentencing, the judge stressed that breaking into homes while families were away showed a calculated exploitation of trust and vulnerability. The burglars were handed custodial sentences designed not just to punish, but to send a clear warning: holiday burglaries will be met with the full weight of the law. Bromley, London, £500,000 jewellery theft. Your home, it's where you lock the door, draw the curtains, and believe you're safe. But in Bromley, London, that belief was shattered in the most terrifying way possible. One night, while the owners were inside their house, intruders forced their way through a bathroom window. In minutes, they stripped the home of gold jewellery worth £500,000. The victims didn't just lose their possessions, they lost their sense of safety in the one place that should never be violated. This was more than a burglary. It was a nightmare brought to life. Burglars didn't just steal. They trespassed into the heart of family life, showing a boldness that shook the community. How did they pull it off? What exactly was taken? And how did police track down criminals brazen enough to strike while people were still at home? This is the story of the Bromley jewellery heist, a case that proved even in the safety of your own home, danger can sometimes be just a window away. Bromley is one of London's largest boroughs, a place where city life meets quiet suburbia. Families choose it for its schools, leafy streets, and the sense of security that comes with living outside the fast pace of central London. On most evenings, the neighbourhood is calm, parents putting children to bed, lights glowing from living room windows, and a rhythm of life that feels steady and safe. But behind that comfort, burglars saw something different. Large homes, valuable possessions, and the assumption that such areas were untouchable. For organized criminals, Bromley represented opportunity. And on one night, that illusion of safety was broken. A family who thought they were secure inside their own home became the victims of a crime that would shock the entire community. It began like any ordinary night in Bromley. The family was inside, going about their evening, unaware that danger was already approaching. Outside, burglars had chosen their target and were ready to strike. Their entry point was as bold as it was invasive: the bathroom window. Forcing it open, they slipped inside, crossing the line from outside threat to inside danger. This wasn't an empty property, left vulnerable while the owners were away. This was a home with its family still inside, a detail that makes the crime all the more chilling. Once inside, the burglars moved with precision. They weren't after electronics or everyday valuables. They knew what they wanted. In a matter of minutes, they gathered gold jewellery worth £500,000, pieces of immense financial value and, for the family, priceless personal meaning. By the time the homeowners realized what had happened, the burglars were already gone. The house was left standing, but what had been stolen was far greater than jewellery. The family's sense of safety had been taken with it. The call to police came quickly. Officers rushed to the property, not only to secure the scene but also to reassure a family shaken to the core. Unlike many burglaries, this wasn't about returning from a trip to find a broken door. The victims had been inside their home when intruders forced their way in. That raised the stakes dramatically. specialist detectives from the Metropolitan Police were brought in. The first priority was forensics, examining the bathroom window, searching for fingerprints, tool marks, or DNA left behind in the rush to escape. Every surface became a potential clue. At the same time, police canvassed the neighborhood. Doorbell cameras, security systems, and local CCTV were checked for unfamiliar cars or figures in the area that evening. Officers also turned to intelligence units already tracking burglary gangs known to target gold and high-value jewelry across London. For the victims, police support was about more than catching criminals. It was about restoring a sense of security in a house that no longer felt like home. For detectives, the question was clear: who was behind such a brazen strike, and how far were they willing to go? From the very beginning, detectives suspected this was no amateur break-in. The sheer scale of the theft, £500,000 worth of jewelry, pointed to an organized crew, not opportunists. The hunt began with the jewelry itself. Gold and high-value pieces are difficult to move without leaving a trail. Pawn shops, jewelry dealers, and second-hand markets across London were quietly alerted. Police also flagged the distinctive items to border and customs units, aware that organized gangs often smuggle stolen gold abroad within days. Surveillance teams were deployed, keeping watch on known burglary suspects with links to previous high-value thefts. At the same time, detectives sifted through ANPR, automatic number plate recognition, data, hoping to trace vehicles that had passed near the home at the exact window of time. Community reports added to the puzzle. Several neighbors remembered a strange car parked on the street in the days leading up to the break-in, its occupants appearing to watch houses. Combined with forensic results from the bathroom window, investigators slowly began to piece together the movements of the suspects. The net was tightening. The challenge for detectives was not only to identify the burglars, but to prove beyond doubt that they were the ones bold enough to break into a family home while its owners were inside. The investigation eventually led police to a group of suspects already known for targeting high-value homes across London. With forensic evidence from the bathroom window, CCTV traces, and intelligence linking them to the stolen jewelry, detectives had built a case strong enough to bring them before the courts. They were charged with burglary, conspiracy to commit burglary, and handling stolen property. In court, prosecutors highlighted not only the financial scale of the theft, £500,000 in jewelry, but also the fear inflicted on the victims. This was no ordinary burglary. The criminals had entered a home while its owners were present, shattering the sense of safety that every family is entitled to. The defense argued they had not intended to confront or harm anyone, but the judge made it clear: breaking into an occupied home is one of the most serious forms of burglary under English law. The psychological trauma left behind counted as heavily as the financial loss. The burglars were handed lengthy custodial sentences, reflecting both the value of what was stolen and the extreme violation of breaking into a house while people were inside. For the victims, justice brought some closure, but the memory of that night would remain long after the courtroom doors closed. The Bromley jewellery heist was more than a theft measured in pounds and carats. It was a direct attack on the very idea of home as a sanctuary. For the family, the scars were not just financial, they were emotional. Every creak at night, every sound at the window, carried the memory of strangers invading the space where they should have felt most protected. For the wider community, the case became a chilling reminder that even in safe, suburban neighborhoods, bold and organized criminals are willing to take risks that go far beyond stolen property. The message was clear: no area is immune, and vigilance must be constant. But the case also showed the determination of the law. Detectives who refused to let the crime fade into statistics, courts that recognized the gravity of an occupied burglary, and sentences that made clear such audacity carries heavy consequences. The Bromley burglary may have started as a nightmare for one family, but it ended as a warning, and as proof that when safety is stolen, justice will fight to return it. Gloucestershire, £1 million antiques and jewellery. In the heart of Gloucestershire, surrounded by rolling countryside and guarded by high walls, stood the home of Sir Christopher Evans, a man whose success had built not just wealth, but the image of security. For most, it looked untouchable, the kind of place no intruder would dare approach. But one night, that illusion shattered. Burglars scaled a 7-foot wall, slipping past barriers designed to keep the outside world away. Inside, they moved with purpose, taking antiques and jewellery worth nearly £1 million. Among the stolen treasures was something no insurance policy could ever replace, a sentimental engagement ring, carrying years of memory and meaning. This wasn't just a burglary measured in figures. It was a strike at the heart of a family's personal history. So how did they plan such a daring crime? Why target one of the most exclusive homes in the county? And how did detectives close in on the men bold enough to attempt a raid of this scale? This is the story of the Gloucestershire heist, where priceless possessions were taken, and with them, memories that could never be returned. Gloucestershire is known for its grand country estates, sweeping green landscapes, and homes that speak of history and privilege. It's a place where wealth meets tradition, where high walls, gated driveways, and private security create the impression of safety. At the center of one such estate stood the home of Sir Christopher Evans, a renowned biotech entrepreneur whose success made him one of the region's most high-profile residents. His property was surrounded by manicured grounds, stone walls, and the kind of privacy most people could only imagine. To many, it looked like a fortress, a symbol of both prosperity and protection. But appearances can be deceiving. To determined burglars, the very features that made the estate appear secure also marked it as a prize worth risking everything for. Beyond the walls were antiques collected over a lifetime, heirlooms passed down through generations, and jewelry carrying not only financial value, but emotional weight. And one night, those who were watching decided to strike, proving that even the most exclusive homes are not beyond reach. The night began quietly, like countless others in Gloucestershire's countryside. But for a team of burglars, it was the moment they had prepared for. They approached Sir Christopher Evans' estate under cover of darkness, facing the first barrier, a 7-foot perimeter wall designed to deter intruders. Scaling it with determination, they crossed into private grounds where few strangers ever set foot. From there, they forced their way into the house. This was not a smash and grab, it was a calculated strike. They moved quickly, heading straight for rooms that held the greatest value. Inside drawers, cabinets, and safes, they found exactly what they were looking for: antiques, rare jewelry, and family heirlooms. The total haul was staggering, close to £1 million. But among the glittering items taken, one stood apart, a sentimental engagement ring. For the family, its worth could not be measured in money. It was memory, history, and meaning, all gone in an instant. By the time the burglars vanished back over the wall, the house stood as it had before, but its treasures, and its sense of safety, had been stripped away. When the burglary was reported, Gloucestershire police launched an immediate and large-scale response. A theft of this magnitude, nearly £1 million in antiques and jewellery, was far from ordinary, and the involvement of a high-profile victim placed the case under intense scrutiny. Forensic officers combed the scene, starting with the 7-foot wall the burglars had scaled. Footprints, fibers, or tool marks could provide vital leads. Inside the house, every point of forced entry was examined for fingerprints or DNA. Even the smallest trace had the potential to identify the suspects. At the same time, detectives turned to surveillance. CCTV from surrounding roads and nearby villages was collected and reviewed, looking for suspicious vehicles in the hours before and after the crime. Neighbors were interviewed, with officers asking if anyone had noticed unfamiliar activity near the estate in the days leading up to the break-in. Because of the scale of the theft, the case was flagged to specialist art and antiques crime units, who worked alongside local investigators. These units understood that high-value antiques and rare jewelry are rarely sold locally. They are often moved quickly through organized crime networks, sometimes even trafficked overseas. This was no routine burglary. It was treated as a major operation, with police determined to track down the offenders before the stolen treasures disappeared forever. The investigation soon pointed towards something more than opportunistic thieves. The way the burglars had entered, the speed with which they located valuables, and the scale of what was taken suggested planning, and possibly an organized gang. Detectives began piecing together intelligence. Information from informants, patterns in other high-value burglaries, and movements of known offenders started to form a clearer picture. Surveillance footage from nearby towns showed vehicles linked to individuals already on police radar. Weeks of work paid off. 4 suspects were eventually identified and tracked down. Coordinated raids were carried out, with officers moving in before the group could disappear or sell off more of the stolen antiques. During searches, investigators recovered some items, though not everything could be returned to the family. Priceless heirlooms, like the stolen engagement ring, were never accounted for, raising painful questions about whether they had been melted down, sold abroad, or hidden away. But with the suspects in custody, police could finally answer the community's biggest fear: the burglars behind one of Gloucestershire's most brazen thefts had been caught. When the 4 suspects were brought before the courts, the scale of the crime ensured it was treated with the utmost seriousness. A burglary of this kind, involving forced entry, high-value theft, and the targeting of a private home, falls under domestic burglary, one of the most heavily punished offenses under English law. Prosecutors laid out the evidence: forensic traces from the property, surveillance linking the suspects to the area, and intelligence pointing to their involvement in other high-value burglaries. The pattern was clear: this was not a random break-in, but a deliberate and calculated operation. Under UK law, burglary carries a maximum sentence of 14 years imprisonment for a dwelling, reflecting the deep impact such crimes have on victims and communities. In this case, the sheer value of the stolen goods, alongside the emotional devastation caused by the loss of sentimental items, weighed heavily in sentencing. The court heard directly about the effect on Sir Christopher Evans and his family. It wasn't just the financial loss, but the trauma of knowing strangers had invaded their home and stolen items tied to memories that could never be replaced. In the end, the suspects were convicted. Each received substantial prison terms, a message from the justice system that targeting families, no matter how wealthy, would not go unanswered. For Sir Christopher Evans and his family, the burglary left scars far deeper than the loss of gold and antiques. The theft of the engagement ring, an object tied to love, memory, and personal history, symbolized the true wound of the crime. It was a reminder that while money can sometimes be recovered, sentimental value is irreplaceable. The estate itself, once a symbol of privacy and safety, now carried a different weight. Every creak of the gates, every shadow beyond the walls, could trigger thoughts of the night strangers breached what should have been the safest place of all: home. For the wider community, the case sent a chilling message: if burglars could target a home like this, no one was immune. It underlined how organized gangs are willing to take extraordinary risks for extraordinary rewards, and why vigilance, no matter where you live, is crucial. Police, meanwhile, used the case to emphasize the importance of security awareness and community cooperation. And for the courts, the strong sentences were not only about punishing the offenders, but about sending a signal: high-value burglary will be met with the full weight of the law. In the end, this was more than a story of stolen jewelry. It was about the fragility of safety, the reach of organized crime, and the painful truth that sometimes, the things we treasure most can never truly be replaced. London NW8, £10.4 million bespoke jewellery heist. London NW8. An address where wealth meets exclusivity. Behind high walls and security gates, homes here are more than places to live, they're fortresses of privilege, filled with treasures most people will only ever see in magazines. But one night, that illusion of safety was shattered. Burglars broke into one of these homes and walked away with £10.4 million in bespoke jewellery, pieces crafted by the world's most prestigious names: Graff, De Beers, Van Cleef and Arpels. Items so rare, experts said they would be impossible to sell without raising alarms. It wasn't just a burglary. It was one of the biggest home heists in British history. The questions were immediate and urgent. Who had the knowledge to target a collection like this? How did they force their way inside such a secure home? And could detectives ever hope to recover jewelry so unique, so recognizable, and so valuable? This was more than a crime of opportunity. It was a deliberate strike at luxury itself, a heist so bold, it left even seasoned investigators stunned. Northwest London's NW8 postcode is not just a neighborhood, it's a world of its own. Here, the streets are lined with luxury townhouses, discreet mansions, and gated properties where wealth is measured not only in money, but in privacy. Residents include celebrities, business leaders, and families whose names rarely leave the pages of society magazines. For those who live here, safety is part of the expectation. Private security firms patrol the area, CCTV cameras watch every street, and high walls guard every estate. It's the kind of place where crime feels distant, where people believe that fortune, location, and locks are enough to protect them. But that illusion was broken. Because behind the gates of one of these homes was a jewelry collection unlike any other. Rings, necklaces, and watches designed by the most celebrated houses in the world, Graff, De Beers, Van Cleef and Arpels. Not just expensive, but bespoke, tailor-made, one of a kind. To the outside world, NW8 was untouchable. But to the burglars who came that night, it was a target worth millions, and an opportunity to prove that no fortress is beyond reach. It began like any other evening in NW8. The streets were quiet, the houses locked, and the neighborhood at rest. But in the shadows, a plan was already in motion. The burglars approached the property with precision. They knew the layout, they knew the risks, and most importantly, they knew exactly what they had come for. This wasn't random. This was targeted. Forcing their way inside, they moved quickly through the house. They weren't searching every drawer or ransacking rooms at random. Instead, they headed straight for the vaults of value, the cases and boxes that held bespoke jewelry worth £10.4 million. What they took was extraordinary, pieces from Graff, De Beers, and Van Cleef and Arpels. Jewels designed not for mass markets, but for individual owners. Each item was unique, instantly recognizable to experts, and virtually impossible to resell through legitimate channels. But that was the genius, and the audacity, of the crime. The burglars weren't afraid of the jewelry being traced. They were betting on their ability to move it through underground networks, where rarity is not a problem but a prize. Within minutes, the burglars were gone. The home, once a sanctuary of wealth and security, had been violated. And in their place, they left a question: how could a fortress in one of London's safest postcodes be breached so easily? When the alarm was raised, detectives knew immediately this was no ordinary burglary. The sheer value of the stolen jewelry, £10.4 million, placed it among the largest home heists in British history. The response was fast and focused. Forensic teams examined the entry points for fingerprints, DNA, and tool marks. Every surface the burglars might have touched was swabbed, every footprint measured. Detectives turned to the streets outside. In NW8, security cameras are everywhere, from private gates to council roads. Hours of CCTV footage were pulled, looking for unusual vehicles or movements around the time of the break-in. But police knew this wasn't just about London. Jewelry of this caliber rarely stays in the UK. It can be broken down, recut, or smuggled abroad within days. That's why the investigation quickly drew in specialist organized crime and art theft units, working alongside international partners. To keep pressure on the criminals, a £500,000 reward was announced for information leading to the recovery of the stolen pieces. The appeal made headlines across the country, raising the stakes and sending a message: these jewels were too rare to disappear quietly. The hunt was on, and the question wasn't just who had carried out the heist, But how long could they really hide £10.4 million worth of jewellery that the whole world now knew was missing? From the start, detectives believed this was no lone job. The precision, the target, and the scale all pointed to an organized criminal network, one with the resources and connections to handle jewelry that couldn't simply be sold on a high street. Intelligence officers began comparing the NW8 heist to other high-value burglaries across Europe. The similarities were striking: the same methods of entry, the same speed, the same focus on bespoke luxury items. This wasn't a one-off. It was part of a pattern. Surveillance became critical. Known offenders linked to international gangs were quietly followed. Their phones, movements, and associates were monitored. Each lead added another piece to the puzzle. Meanwhile, the stolen jewelry posed its own challenge. Items from Graff, De Beers, and Van Cleef & Arpels are instantly recognizable. Selling them intact was almost impossible. That meant detectives were racing against time, fearing the pieces could be dismantled, melted down, or trafficked abroad before they could be traced. Tips began to flow in after the £500,000 reward was announced. Some were false trails. Others pointed detectives closer to the men they believed had orchestrated the break-in. Step by step, the circle tightened, until police were finally ready to strike. Raids were carried out. Suspects were taken into custody. And what had begun as one of Britain's most audacious burglaries was now moving into its next chapter, the courtroom. When the suspects were brought before the court, the scale of the crime became undeniable. Prosecutors laid out the facts: a break-in at one of London's wealthiest addresses, the theft of £10.4 million in bespoke jewellery, and the evidence that tied the men to one of the boldest burglaries the UK had ever seen. This wasn't just burglary, it was aggravated burglary, because the intruders had been armed. Under UK law, that charge carries a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. The prosecution argued that the planning, precision, and value of the goods placed the crime at the very highest level of seriousness. The defense attempted to downplay involvement, suggesting some of the suspects were only minor players. But the jury heard how the group had worked as a team, with each man playing a role in a carefully coordinated operation. The judge emphasized the wider impact of the crime, not just the financial loss, but the fear created when even the most secure homes can be violated. He described the burglary as a ruthless, targeted raid on a family's private sanctuary. In the end, the suspects were convicted. Lengthy prison sentences followed, reflecting both the enormous value of what was taken and the threat posed to any household by criminals willing to use force to get what they want. The law had spoken, but justice could not erase the fact that much of the stolen jewelry was still missing. The London NW8 heist left behind more than an empty jewelry case. It left scars on the family who lived there, scars of violation, fear, and the knowledge that even the strongest walls and the best locks could not keep danger away. The financial loss was staggering, £10.4 million. But the emotional loss was even greater. Some of the stolen pieces were not just items of luxury, but symbols of memory and meaning, bespoke creations tied to milestones, love, and family history. For investigators, the case was a sobering reminder of the power of organized crime. Much of the jewelry was never recovered. Experts believe some pieces were broken down, diamonds reset, and gold melted, erasing their identity forever. What had once been masterpieces of design became untraceable fragments scattered across the black market. For London, the burglary shattered the idea that exclusivity equaled safety. If one of the city's most secure homes could be breached, no household, however wealthy, could feel completely untouchable. The convictions brought closure, but not full justice. The victims would never see most of their jewelry again. And the story remains a warning: in the world of high-value crime, no treasure is ever truly safe. From the quiet lanes of East Sussex, where £50,000 in luxury handbags and watches vanished in the night, to Wanborough, Swindon, where a family's dream holiday turned into a £21,000 payday for thieves. From the fear in Bromley, where £500,000 in jewellery was stolen while the owners were still inside, to the Gloucestershire estate, where burglars scaled 7-foot walls and made off with antiques and heirlooms worth nearly £1 million. And finally, to the streets of London NW8, where one of the biggest home burglaries in British history saw £10.4 million in bespoke jewellery disappear into the hands of organised criminals. 5 cases. 5 crimes. Together, they reveal the scale of a problem that reaches from small towns to the wealthiest corners of Britain. Burglary is not just about money, it's about safety, trust, and the violation of the one place we should all feel secure, home. And so the questions remain: how far will criminals go for wealth? And how can families, whether ordinary or elite, ever truly feel safe again? If you found these stories gripping, don't let them fade into silence. Subscribe for more true crime documentaries. Like this video to support the channel. And share it with others, because these crimes aren't just headlines, they are warnings we can all learn from. Because in the end, awareness is protection, and protection is power.